Have you given everything to everyone else and now feel completely empty? You are not alone. This hollowness you feel is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of a process Carl Jung called individuation. Jung discovered that this specific state of complete depletion is not burnout at all. He viewed it as an alchemical transformation of the psyche, and what comes next will change everything you thought you knew about yourself. Most people will tell you that giving is noble. Society celebrates the selfless person who puts everyone else first. But Jung understood something darker. He saw that the culture that praises you for giving everything is the same culture that destroys you for it. This is what Jung called the persona. The persona is the mask you wear in public. It is the version of yourself that society accepts. For those who identify today as empaths, this persona often becomes the giver mask. The person who always helps, always listens, always sacrifices. But Jung warned that when you identify too strongly with your persona, something terrifying happens. The mask begins to suffocate your soul. You become so good at being what others need that you forget who you actually are. Your authentic self gets buried under layers of people-pleasing and self-sacrifice. The giver mask eventually becomes a prison. Jung wrote extensively about this in his work on psychological types and the individuation process. He observed that when someone over-identifies with a single role, the psyche begins to rebel. Here is where Jung introduced a concept that most people find uncomfortable. He argued that selfless giving often creates what he called the shadow. The shadow is everything you have denied about yourself. It contains all the thoughts, feelings, and desires you have pushed down because they do not fit with your self-image as a good person. For empaths who pride themselves on being kind and giving, the shadow contains something shocking: resentment, anger, the desire to say no, the wish to be selfish. Consider a case profile based on patterns Jung observed throughout his clinical work. An individual might spend years giving endlessly to family, friends, and colleagues. On the surface, they appear selfless. But in their unconscious mind, a different story is unfolding. Every time they say yes, when they want to say no, a small piece of resentment gets added to the shadow. Every time they ignore their own needs to meet someone else's needs, the anger grows. Every time they sacrifice their own dreams for someone else's comfort, the shadow gets darker. Jung made a radical observation about this process. He said that if you do not create conscious boundaries, your unconscious will create them for you. And the unconscious does not ask permission. It creates boundaries through illness, through sudden explosive rage, through complete emotional detachment. This is not weakness. This is the psyche protecting itself the only way it knows how. Jung documented this phenomenon across numerous therapeutic encounters throughout his extensive clinical practice. He noticed a predictable sequence in how the unconscious manifests these forced boundaries. First comes physical exhaustion that no amount of rest can cure. Then mysterious illnesses appear that doctors struggle to diagnose. The body literally shuts down operations to prevent further depletion. If the person ignores these signals, the unconscious escalates. Anxiety attacks emerge from nowhere. Depression settles in like fog. The psyche is screaming for attention through the only language it has left. This brings us to the phase that frightens people the most. This triggers what Jung described as a profound introversion, a turning inward he called Nigredo in alchemical terms, the blackening, a necessary descent into darkness. After years or decades of endless giving, something inside the empath simply stops. They do not announce it. They do not explain it. They just become cold, unreachable, silent. To everyone around them, this looks like depression or cruelty, but Jung understood it differently. He saw this as necessary incubation. The empath is not dying. They are being reborn. During this withdrawal phase, something profound happens in the psyche. The old identity, the persona of the giver, begins to dissolve. Jung called this ego death. It feels terrifying because your entire sense of who you are starts to crumble. The person who defined themselves by being needed suddenly stops caring if anyone needs them. The person who found meaning in helping others cannot muster the energy to help anyone. This is not laziness or selfishness. This is the psyche reorganizing itself at the deepest level. Jung observed this pattern across multiple cases throughout his career. He noticed that individuals who reached this state of complete withdrawal were at the threshold of transformation. They were about to undergo what he called the integration of opposites. In Jungian psychology, health is not about being all light or all dark. Health is about integrating both. The empath who has only known how to give must now integrate the part of themselves that can receive and refuse. What happens in this integration phase often shocks people who witness it firsthand. The formerly gentle person develops a spine of steel. The one who never said no suddenly says it with ease. The one who absorbed everyone's chaos now deflects it with calm firmness. Jung understood this was not personality change. This was personality completion. All those rejected qualities, all that suppressed strength, all that denied assertiveness, was always part of them. It was hiding in the shadow, waiting to be reclaimed. This integration process leads to what Jung considered the pinnacle of psychological development. He called it individuation. For the empath, this means rising from the ashes of their former self and becoming something entirely new. Empaths aren't broken, they're alchemists in progress. The alchemist's path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook, in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. Jung termed this transformed state simply the self, the center of the total personality, a state of inner wholeness and sovereignty. Let me be clear about what this means. The person who reaches the self does not stop feeling deeply. They do not stop caring about others, but they fundamentally change how they engage with the world. The difference is profound. The old version gave from a place of obligation, guilt, and the need for validation. The new version gives from a place of conscious choice. The old version had no boundaries because they believed boundaries were selfish. The new version understands that boundaries are essential for sustainable compassion. The old version said yes to everything and resented half of it. The new version says no without guilt and yes without resentment. Jung called this the ability to hold the tension of opposites. You can be both compassionate and boundaried. You can care deeply about someone and still refuse to enable their dysfunction. You can love someone and still walk away if the relationship is toxic. This is not cold. This is wisdom. This is what Jung meant when he wrote about the integration of personality. You are no longer one-sided. You are whole. But this transformation comes with a cost that Jung documented carefully. The people around you will hate the new version of you, not because you become cruel, but because you become unusable. The family members who relied on you to absorb their chaos will call you selfish. The friends who used you as an emotional dumping ground will say you have changed. The colleagues who benefited from your endless availability will accuse you of no longer being a team player. Jung understood that this backlash is inevitable. He wrote that when you stop participating in collective unconscious agreements, you become a threat to the system. Every family, workplace, and social group has unspoken rules about who plays what role. The empath's role has always been the emotional shock absorber. When you stop playing that role, the entire system destabilizes. People do not react well to this. They will try to pull you back into your old patterns. They will guilt you. They will manipulate you. They will tell you that the real you was the version that sacrificed everything. Jung observed that the intensity of the backlash often correlates directly with how much someone benefited from your lack of boundaries. The people who scream loudest about your transformation are usually the ones who exploited you most. They dress their objections in concern. They claim they are worried about you. But Jung saw through this theater. What they really worry about is losing their emotional servant. What they fear is having to deal with their own chaos without you as a buffer. This is where Jung's concept of the shadow becomes critically important again. You must understand that other people will project their shadow onto you. Projection is a defense mechanism where someone attributes their own unacceptable feelings to someone else. When you set a boundary, the person who wants to violate that boundary will often accuse you of being cold, uncaring, or selfish. They are projecting their own guilt onto you. They cannot accept that they want to use you, so they make you the villain for refusing to be used. Jung taught his patients to recognize projection when it happens. If someone's description of you does not match your internal experience, you are likely experiencing projection. If they accuse you of motivations you do not have, that is projection. If their emotional reaction seems disproportionate to your actual behavior, that is projection. Learning to identify projection is essential for maintaining your boundaries during this transformation. You cannot let other people's projections pull you back into the persona of the selfless martyr. Now we come to perhaps Jung's most important insight about this transformation. He realized that the old you had to die so the real you could live. This is not metaphorical. This is a genuine psychological death and rebirth. The version of you that needed to be needed had to die. The version of you that derived worth from being useful had to die. The version of you that believed love meant endless self-sacrifice had to die. These deaths are painful. You may mourn them, but they are necessary. What emerges from this death is what Jung called the authentic self. Not the persona, not the mask, not the role you played, but the actual core of who you are beneath all the conditioning. This self knows its own worth without external validation. This self can give generously without depleting itself. This self can receive without guilt. This self can say no without apologizing. This self is integrated, whole, and complete. Jung was clear that most people remain identified with their persona their entire lives. They play assigned roles without questioning if those roles reflect their true nature. For those with empathic sensitivity, this means a lifetime of giving, depleting, resenting, and repeating. But those who break free through individuation become something remarkable. They become who they were always meant to be. People who complete this transformation no longer confuse kindness with compliance. They understand that compassion sometimes means letting people experience consequences. They offer support, but not enabling. They give love, but not at the cost of their well-being. This is mature empathy. This is sustainable compassion. These individuals develop what Jung called conscious participation in the collective unconscious. They can still sense emotional atmospheres, but no longer absorb everything without filter. They maintain psychological containers, holding someone else's pain temporarily to understand it without carrying it permanently. This transforms empathy from burden into gift. Transformed individuals become magnetic to healthy people and repellent to toxic people. Manipulative individuals sense their tactics will not work. People seeking emotional dumping grounds feel this person will not absorb unconditionally. Meanwhile, people doing their own work recognize a kindred spirit immediately. This is how Jung explained the phenomenon of your social circle changing after transformation. The people who benefited from your lack of boundaries disappear. They are replaced by people who respect boundaries. The relationships built on codependency dissolve. They are replaced by relationships built on mutual respect. This is not about becoming cold. This is about attracting the right people instead of being accessible to everyone. Jung documented what happens to emotional relationships during transformation. Before, those with high sensitivity cannot distinguish their feelings from absorbed feelings. After, they develop emotional discrimination. They feel with someone without feeling for someone. They witness pain without taking ownership. They offer empathy without drowning in it. This is the difference between being an emotional sponge and an emotional alchemist. Alchemy was important to Jung. He studied alchemical texts extensively, recognizing them as symbolic descriptions of psychological transformation. Alchemists talked about turning lead into gold. Jung understood this as turning unconscious lead into conscious gold. For empaths, the alchemical process turns sensitivity from weakness into superpower through shadow integration. Jung recognized that the alchemical process always involves transformative fire. For empaths, that fire is the pain of withdrawal, the death of the old self, the discomfort of setting boundaries. But fire does not destroy. Fire purifies. It burns away everything false, everything borrowed, everything imposed by others. What remains after the fire is pure gold, your authentic essence, the person you were born to be before the world taught you to be small. You might think becoming boundaried means becoming less empathetic. The opposite is true. People who integrate their shadow become more genuinely compassionate because their compassion is no longer contaminated by unconscious needs. When you gave before, part of that giving was motivated by needing to be needed, to feel valuable, to avoid rejection. Now that you know your worth, your giving becomes pure. You give by choice, not from fear. This is what Jung meant by the difference between love and neurotic attachment. Before integration, much of what empaths call love is actually a complex mix of genuine care and unconscious neediness. After integration, love becomes cleaner. You can care about someone without needing them to need you. You can support someone without needing them to depend on you. You can love someone without needing them to validate your worth. This is the difference between enmeshment and authentic relationship. Now we must talk about what Jung identified as the final challenge of this transformation. After you have done the work, after you have integrated your shadow and established your boundaries, there will still be moments when you slip back into old patterns. Jung was very clear that individuation is not a permanent state you achieve once and keep forever. It is a dynamic process that requires ongoing conscious attention. You will have days when you say yes when you should say no. You will have moments when you absorb someone else's anxiety. You will have times when you fall back into the persona of the giver. The difference is that now you have awareness. You catch yourself. You course correct. You do not spiral back into years of unconscious self-sacrifice. You notice what happened, you understand why it happened, and you make a different choice next time. This is what Jung called the maintenance phase of individuation. It never ends, but it becomes easier. The conscious choices become more automatic. The boundaries become more natural. The self becomes more stable. Jung believed that people who complete this transformation serve a vital function in society. He viewed such individuals as carriers of consciousness for the collective. These are people whose development exceeds what the collective is ready for. They see possibilities others cannot yet see. They model ways of being that challenge norms. For empaths, this means showing the world that it is possible to be both sensitive and strong, both caring and boundaried, both compassionate and self-protective. This is not about becoming a perfect person. Jung rejected perfection. He advocated for wholeness. Wholeness means accepting all parts of yourself, including parts that society says you should hide. For empaths, This means accepting that you are allowed to be angry. You are allowed to be selfish sometimes. You are allowed to prioritize yourself. These are not flaws. These are necessary aspects of a complete human being. When you integrate them consciously, they strengthen you. Jung observed something fascinating about people years into their transformation. They develop what he called symbolic life. They start seeing their experiences as part of a larger, meaningful pattern. They understand that their suffering was purposeful and necessary. It was preparing them for their authentic purpose in life. The years of giving taught them profound truths about human nature. The pain of depletion showed them their limits. The anger in their shadow gave them strength. Nothing was wasted. Everything was part of becoming whole. Let me tell you what Jung observed about the long-term impact of this transformation. Years after the initial breakthrough, these individuals look back on their old selves with compassion, but no desire to return. They remember the person who gave everything to everyone. They understand why that person made those choices, but they do not miss being that person, because they now know something that person did not know. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot love others sustainably if you do not love yourself first. You cannot hold space for others if you do not hold space for yourself. This realization is revolutionary for empaths. It means that taking care of yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. It means that saying no is not cruel. It is honest. It means that prioritizing your needs is not narcissistic. It is healthy. Jung spent his career trying to help people understand this, but it is particularly hard for empaths to accept because their entire identity has been built on putting others first. Accepting that you matter as much as everyone else feels wrong, until one day it feels right. That day marks your transformation. Jung also warned about using spiritual concepts to avoid psychological work. Modern psychologists call this spiritual bypassing. Some people think becoming spiritual means transcending all needs and boundaries. They use these ideas to justify continuing endless self-sacrifice. They say things like, love has no boundaries, or a truly evolved person gives without expectation. Jung would view this as psychic inflation, using lofty ideals to avoid the difficult work of integration. True maturity always includes healthy boundaries. Saints and sages throughout history maintained clear boundaries. They withdrew regularly for solitude. They said no to constant demands on their time. They protected their vital energy because they understood that sustainable service to others requires genuine self-care first. The transformation Jung documented is not about becoming cold or disconnected. It is about becoming wisely discriminating in how you direct your energy. You learn to distinguish between people who respect your energy and people who drain it. You learn the difference between someone having a temporary crisis who needs support and someone with a chronic pattern of creating drama. You learn that you can care about someone from a distance without being consumed by their chaos. This discrimination is not judgment. It is hard-earned wisdom. As we reach the end of this journey through Jung's understanding of the empath transformation, I want you to understand the most important truth. You are not broken for feeling empty after years of giving. You are not weak for needing to withdraw. You are not selfish for wanting to prioritize yourself. You are human. And you are in the midst of a profound psychological metamorphosis that Jung recognized as one of the most important processes in human development. This transformation is not happening to you. It is happening for you. The old version of you believed that your worth came from what you did for others. The new version knows that you have inherent worth simply for existing. The old version was terrified of being alone. The new version values solitude as essential for maintaining your center. The old version needed external validation constantly. The new version validates yourself. The old version gave to avoid rejection. The new version gives from overflow. This is the difference between the unconscious empath and the individuated empath. Both feel deeply, but only one chooses wisely. Jung left us with a final insight about this transformation. He said that the people who resist their own individuation the most fiercely are often the ones who need it most desperately. If you are fighting against your own transformation, if you are trying to force yourself back into being the person who gives everything to everyone, ask yourself why. What are you afraid will happen if you claim your power? What are you afraid people will think if you set boundaries? What are you afraid you will lose if you stop playing your assigned role? These fears are worth examining, because on the other side of them is freedom. The day you finally accept that the old you had to die is the day you truly begin to live. Not as a role, not as a mask, not as what others need you to be, but as who you actually are. This is what Jung called the privilege of a lifetime, to become who you truly are. And for empaths, this means becoming someone who feels everything but gives strategically, someone who cares deeply but protects fiercely, someone who loves fully but never at the cost of their own soul. This is not what you think when you hear the word empath, but this is what empaths become when they complete the journey Jung mapped out. They become whole. If this transformation resonates with you, if you recognize yourself in this profound journey, I want you to know something important. You are exactly where you need to be. The emptiness you feel right now is not permanent. It is the space being created for your authentic self to emerge. Trust the process. Honor the death of who you were. Welcome the birth of who you are becoming. This is your individuation. This is your alchemy. This is your revolution. And Jung would tell you that you are not alone. Every person who has walked this path before you knows the cost, and every one of them would tell you it was worth it. In the alchemist's path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get the Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.